Come on out, Johnny. We just want to talk.
Just want to talk, huh? Well, I just want to rock.
Oh, Ow. Oh, my kidney. You just got cyberpunked. Night City, where dreams come true. A lively city full of opportunity and mystery. A city where anything is possible. Where you can be anyone, do anything your heart desires. At least, that's what they say. Individual experiences may vary. Since its inception, Cyberpunk 2077 has had a rough go of things. It's well known that the game released with an enormous amount of bugs and glitches. The critical and popular reactions were filled with as much disappointment as praise. At this point, a full 2 years into release, do we have a product that functions well enough to justify its price? This is what we'll be looking at in this video. We'll see what works and what doesn't. When it comes to open world RPGs like Cyberpunk, or really any game for that matter, I am very much a role player. My enjoyment comes from my ability to engross myself in the worlds. The story of a game is extremely important, of course, but what ultimately keeps me hooked is atmosphere. Enjoyment of anything is subjective, but there are factors that add up to an experience where one can more easily superimpose themselves on the characters they play as. How well those factors work in Cyberpunk is what we'll be examining today. We'll be taking a look briefly at how the game was made, go into the story, and mainly be focusing on how the game plays. My hope is that I can give you a clear picture of what to expect from it. Cyberpunk 2077 is the video game adaptation of pen and paper RPG Cyberpunk 2020. Mike Pondsmith, the creator of the series, was heavily involved with the development of this game. He emphasized a desire to stay faithful to the source material. CD Projekt Red approached Pondsmith as fans of the series already, which helped convince him to work with them. The world was built as a parallel universe, so the integrity of the original series could be kept along with the freedom for the devs to experiment a bit with new ideas. CDPR originally announced the project at the 2012 CD Projekt Red Summer Conference. Their first gameplay reveal didn't come until E3 2018 for a specially invited audience. Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the most expensive games ever made, with the budget coming in at a whopping $313 million. For reference, the Avengers Endgame production budget was $356 million. So to say that this is a AAA game is kind of an understatement. Canadian company Jolly Research handled the facial animations, which were all matched to the different languages. A huge task in and of itself. Keanu Reeves volunteered to do his character's motion capture, which lends a sense of authenticity to his in-game performance. Cyberpunk was marketed with the promise that it would be released when it was done, but I think we all know how that turned out.
Hey there, dollface.
The PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions are simply not in an acceptable state.
Like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna make so much cool shit, this is gonna be great. Nope.
You done fucked it up! From what I understand, playing Cyberpunk on a PS4 is like this.
CDPR was actually subject to a lawsuit regarding the promised state of the game's functionality at release, and they settled to the tune of $1.8 million. CDPR's co-founder Marcin Iwinski said that throughout the life of the project, he became depressed from the extreme pressures of making a game at this scale. All things considered, the devs may have bitten off more than they could chew, so what ended up being the final product is kind of miraculous. On December 10th, 2020, Cyberpunk released for PS4, Google Stadia, PC, and Xbox One. We're going to go ahead and get into the story now, so if you want to avoid any spoilers, just skip to this time code. In every life path, your character V is moving away from their past, getting involved in a shady deal that goes bad, and ends up in your meeting Jackie Wells. Jackie is a mercenary who befriends you, helping you get employment in Night City once your brief backstory section ends. A montage plays where some cool stuff happens that you don't participate in, showing us a time-lapse of V and Jackie's illegal exploits. My first problem with the plot starts here. If you play the Corpo life path, your boss betrays you and you are fired from megacorporation Arasaka before you and Jackie go on your escapades. As a former employee of a world-renowned company, no one's first thought would be, well, time to start risking my life, robbing and shooting people. More likely you'd say, I better get those job applications out there at other companies for a similar position. Just because you work in corporate counterintelligence with a mercenary once or twice, doesn't mean you just up and join their very dangerous line of work, even if you're best friends. The Nomad story makes a bit more sense in that you're already used to being a smuggler with a shady past, and Jackie is a new friend in Night City with similar interests. Moving on. V's cyberware has been acting up, so you go meet Victor the Ripper Doc, a sort of underground tech surgeon. He fixes your software and hooks you up with a new ocular implant that lets you scan people and environments, Batman style. He also gives you a hand augmentation for better gun handling. Jackie sets you up to meet Dexter Deshawn, a big-time gangster who hires the two of you to help in a major heist that promises a hefty reward. The job is to steal a prototype biochip from Arasaka Corp. In order to pull it off, you need to recover a military-grade advanced RC bot called the Flathead, capable of advanced hacking and invisibility. To get the bot, you have to re-steal it from a gang called Maelstrom, who stole it from a Militech convoy. Crash Maelstrom's headquarters, take back the bot, and Militech lets you keep their multi-million-dollar piece of hardware for some reason. Additionally, you need to gather intel from a brain dance, which is a recording of people's lived experiences. It's like advanced VR, with emotional responses and inner thoughts included. This brings you to Evelyn and Judy. Evelyn is the owner of a nightclub that hosts pornographic brain dances, and Judy is the porn director. Evelyn recorded her time at Yorinobu Arasaka's hotel room, where the chip you need to steal is being kept. She proceeds to float through the air and convince Judy to let you and your other comrade in crime, T-Bug, see that recording. By examining the footage, you all find out where the biochip is stored. Once you've gathered the necessary intel, you and Jackie go on the heist. Before you can escape with the biochip, Yorinobu unexpectedly returns to his hotel room, where he meets with his father, Saburo Arasaka, founder of the eponymous corporation. Saburo confronts his son for stealing the biochip, known as the Relic, for his own gain. Yorinobu proceeds to kill his father in a fit of rage. You and Jackie are now the only witnesses to the murder. In making a hasty escape, the container for the biochip is damaged. Evelyn tells you the relic must be inserted into someone's brain for it to survive. Jackie volunteers and the two of you drive off. My problem here is that the point is repeatedly made that the chip needs to be kept at a stable 39 degrees Fahrenheit.
Manual details a special temp-controlled container. Relic needs to be kept real cool.
So, chip's gotta stay in the freezer.
Yep, could damage it otherwise. No way. Temp's too low, could fluctuate. Temp doesn't match the guidelines. Won't find a thing here.
Yet you have to put it in your 98.6 degree body to keep it working? Look, I'm no scientist, but that seems like a pretty big temperature difference. Unfortunately, in the scuffle, Jackie succumbs to his injuries, leaving you to place the chip in your head. Okay, now here's where I have a problem with the pacing of the story. V is depressed by his friend's passing, but we haven't actually spent any time with Jackie aside from stealing the Flathead. So when Jackie died, I as a player didn't feel anything. Sure, it was spelled out in a cutscene, the history of the two, but that didn't allow me to get to know Jackie. Maybe just another mission or two, or even a fun night on the town where we get drunk and play pool together would have made his death more impactful. Having been spotted fleeing the scene, the blame for Saburo Arasaka's death is placed on you. Dexter Deshawn decides to shoot you and dispose of your body in a landfill, thinking you are a loose end that could lead back to him. After blacking out, you wake up as Johnny Silverhand, getting ready to play a rock show with his band Samurai. As most musicians do right after a gig, Johnny and pals run an aerial assault on a heavily guarded corporate skyscraper, Arasaka headquarters. The plan is to set off a nuclear bomb in the main elevator, a la the Matrix, crippling the corporation and sticking it to the man. They're successful, but Saburo quickly captures Johnny. Instead of killing him, Saburo places Johnny in a mind prison, where his consciousness is trapped in cyberspace forever. Incredibly, having survived a gunshot wound to the head, you wake up in the landfill as V in present day. You are coincidentally picked up by Saburo's bodyguard Takamura, just as you are crawling away from the mounds of trash. The two of you are ambushed by a biker gang, who are presumably after the biochip. You barely survive the encounter, and Takamura takes you back to Victor's clinic. That mind prison Saburo can find Johnny Silverhand in is what's inside V's skull. Vic informs you that Johnny's consciousness is starting to overwrite yours. It's begun rewiring your brain to think that it's its own foreign body, essentially rejecting itself herself and killing you in the process. In a second heavy-handed Matrix reference, Misty, Victor's assistant, gives you a selection of blue and red pills which slow down or speed up the progress of the mind meld. At this point, the clock is ticking, and V needs to find a way to stop the transformation. Johnny begins to manifest himself in hallucinations, which get stronger as time goes on, eventually leading him to be capable of taking the reins of V's body. Takamura tells you that pulling the chip out of your head would be fatal, so in order to save yourself, it needs to be skillfully removed. His goal is to find Evelyn, so he can figure out how to get to Yorinobu Arasaka and bring him to justice for the patricide. In the time that V was in the landfill, Evelyn Parker has disappeared, so you and Takamura need to do some detective work. By politely checking the emails of a brothel owner, subtly named Woodman, you discover Evelyn was taken to a ripper doc named Fingers. Johnny shows up informing you of a place called Mikoshi, where Arasaka stored the engrams of their victims. It's also where the Soul Killer program originated, which is the AI that traps and imprisons people's minds. Johnny's thinking is that Mikoshi is where you will be able to fix your problem with the relic. He also hints at someone named Alt Cunningham. We head over to Fingers' shop and gently question him for information. He says Evelyn was brought to him in too bad a condition to save, so he called for her disposal by his fixer. The guys that ended up taking her mentioned snuff film brain dances under the Death's Head label. In order to find them, you buy an illegal recording and analyze it with Judy to figure out where it was made. The two of you track them down to an old power plant, where you stage a daring rescue. After saving her and analyzing a couple more of Evelyn's brain dances, you discover that she had betrayed her employers on a recon mission that led them to the relic. The mysterious employers were after Johnny's engram in an effort to find information on his girlfriend, Alt Cunningham. It turns out Alt is the original creator of the Soul Killer. Arasaka had kidnapped her so she could develop their Secure Your Soul program. Johnny's earlier raid was an attempt to free her from their clutches. Unfortunately, the both of them were subjugated to the Soul Killer. At this point, aside from working with Pan Am and her Nomad crew, a lot of what happens in the story is forgettable, so we'll just skip to the end. There are at least two very bad endings, both of which I went through first without realizing it. You can opt to just give up and kill yourself, or you can work with Arasaka to get the chip out of your head, betraying everything and everyone you've worked with up until that point. The other endings are more interesting. With or without Johnny's help, you can lead another raid on Arasaka headquarters, and choose whether to have Johnny take over for V, saving the life of your body, but at the cost of control over it. One of the problems I have with the endings is that the good ones are tied into side missions prior to the point of no return. After going through the two shitty endings, I had to look up how to get to the good ones. I was surprised at how unclear it was made to the player that you needed to work with Rogue and or Pan Am in order to mount an effective attack on Arasaka. From what I understand, there was a lot of cut content, which would explain why some of the story beats fell kind of flat. But yeah, those are the endings. You can kill yourself, be an asshole and live, die and become Johnny, or just die. Those are of course oversimplifications, but that's pretty much how they end up. So how's the gameplay? The majority of V's missions end up being stealth or shooter sections, or a bit of both depending on your playstyle. Both are well-balanced, equally viable options. I was actually reminded a lot of the more recent Deus Ex games when being sneaky, and those are games that do stealth particularly well. When you perform certain actions, you gain experience in the relevant subcategories of your larger skills. For example, when you hack security cameras, you are given quick hack experience, which unlocks various perks that are all affected by your intelligence level. Complete enough objectives and you level up, giving you points towards perks and skills. My personal favorite is Cool, of course, which primarily governs the effectiveness of stealth. Depending on your skill levels, additional dialogue options are made available. Dialogue choices related to your life path don't change much. In certain exchanges between my Nomad and Corpo playthroughs, aside from a few words being different, nothing ultimately changed.
Who's the prima donna?
Corpo agent, internal affairs. Been skidding around town asking after the convoy as if her life depended on finding it. The one lead she's got zip-tied in her trunk.
Corpo agent, what's she playing at?
Hell if I know. Been skidding around town asking after the convoy as if her life depended on finding it. The one lead she's got zip-tied in her trunk.
I had a big problem getting money in the first 3/4 of the game. I wanted to upgrade my cyber implants and maybe buy some better guns, but I could never afford it. Literally, it took me until the end game to get enough cash together to get all the basic cybernetic enhancements, and there were still more to buy. I was doing NCPD side missions and gigs for the side characters, but they never really rewarded me with anything other than common crafting components. I tried collecting all the rare or unique weapons I could find and selling them, but that didn't even help much because even the best guns can be sold for maybe $1,000 or $2. The best upgrades for your character cost upwards of $30,000. Sure, there are a bunch of side quests available, but they don't really reward you enough for you to feel like you can afford things. Maybe that's a meta thing the devs were going for? Like, unless you're one of the 1%, you really can't afford to do much in Night City? I don't want to be filthy rich, I just want to be able to afford enough to get me through the Cyber Psycho missions, so I can earn enough money to be able to go through more Cyber Psycho missions. I also wanted to buy some sick drip from clothing vendors, but all the good stuff was way too pricey. There are even main missions that require upwards of $10,000 just to start. There were a lot of bugs. So many I couldn't even count. Having played 2 different campaigns, I saw the same glitches in the same spots consistently.
Hello there, Night City! Stanley here with you. Hello there, Night City!
How these haven't been fixed at this point, I have no idea. It wasn't like they were little bugs that happened out of the corner of my eye. They were glaring issues that popped up in critical story moments. When someone's mouth doesn't move while they are delivering serious lines, all immersion is broken. Like I said, I'm very much a role player. I've gotten pretty good at ignoring little things that take me out of the experience of a game in service of enjoying it more. Even giving this game the credit it's due for the animation quality, it just seems that much more bizarre that such pertinent bugs were happening so often in key moments of the campaign. Too many times I was trying to listen to the important dialogue taking place where some police standoff was happening half a mile away that sounded like it was happening right outside. That has more to do with the audio mixing, which we will get into in a little bit. Suffice it to say, a lot of the important story beats were undermined by silly things happening in both the fore and background where the game seemed to be breaking harder as time went along. This makes me worry that even the bones of this game are fragile. Like if they were to patch one bug, another one would show up in its place. Almost every time I put a microscope to the details, the more it seems like CDPR's management woke up one day and went, oh yeah, we gotta release this thing at some point. Did they take on a project that was out of their league? I don't think so. The Witcher has had so much success. I have a hard time believing with all that financial cushion and creative passion that they couldn't have made another large open world game that functions at least as good as CDPR's last big title. As I mentioned before, the different dialogue options don't actually affect anything in the larger story. Matter of fact, I looked this up. Roughly 98% of dialogue doesn't affect the plot in any way. Only 2% of the dialogue choices in this game meaningfully affect how the story plays out. You certainly get the impression that your life path gives you access to unique branches of storyline, but the further into the campaign you get, the less apparent it is that you actually have control over your own fate in Night City. It comes off as more a series of well-animated in-game cutscenes, rather than a dynamic and pliable world where you can decide how things will go. The supporting characters all have personality, but I just don't care about them in the end because all we do are favors for them. And good lord, do a lot of people want you to do favors for them. But they never come in clutch during critical moments until the very end. Romance options are available, but I didn't get into that particular feature. There's a good amount of verticality in the maps that works well with the light parkour traversal style. That mechanic is squandered, however, because for as many buildings and fences you can climb, there aren't many treasures to find off the beaten path. The only scavenger hunt is finding various tarot card graffiti on buildings around the city. I'm not really impressed with the wanted system. Police tend to appear from nowhere, who will annihilate you for a 1-star wanted level. Why can't I just be arrested and taken to jail instead of having to reload my last save? The game uses fast travel stations that are unlocked when you pass by them on the streets. Problem is, they are sometimes pretty far from where your character is after completing a quest, so you'll end up having to walk or drive through the maze-like buildings for a while before being able to fast travel. I'm not sure why they went with this style instead of a fast travel from anywhere type of mechanic. It makes sense to have the fast travel stations unlock when you go to a new area. It's just tedious having to walk or drive over to them to use the stations instead of just clicking on them in your map like you can do in Skyrim. This is probably one of the few games where I preferred driving in first person. The controls felt tight and there was enough window space to see all around. Definitely helped with the immersion. I was halfway tempted to start following all the traffic laws. There's a distinct lack of taxi services in Night City. One of the side quests is helping a sentient AI cab company owner named Delamain recapture his rogue taxis. Why can't we call him up and have him drive us around while we take in the sights? I'd love to be chauffeured around by an automated taxi, sipping on champagne, smoking cigarettes in the back seat. The landscape is really something to gawk at. Speaking of which, let's talk about the graphics of the game. I have very few complaints about the graphics of Cyberpunk 2077. Just stop at any point in Night City, look up and around, and you'll see a bunch of details that help the world feel larger than life. This game looks incredible. Hovercrafts fly between the skyscrapers, big holographic advertisements light up the sky, huge laterally constructed building bridges pass overhead as you drive around. There's a lot to appreciate about the environments, from downtown to the landfill. Based on how little you can actually do around the city, however, this all feels like a lot of very fancy window dressing. You can really only go into about 1 out of every 300 buildings in the map. One of the devs explained that allowing access into more buildings would ultimately take up more RAM, putting it out of the realm of accessibility for consoles and mid-tier PC builds. I have an issue with this rationale because back in the day, if you wanted to transition from outdoor to indoor environment, all it took was a short loading screen. I really wanted to see one of those sexy brain dances that seem to be everywhere in this hedonistic future society. They put a lot of time into modeling the boobs and cocks of this game for them to not be usable in some way. Maybe that would have pushed the rating into adults only territory. Not everything has to be seamless in an open world game. That said, the details of your hands, the guns, the surfaces, the lighting, and even the fact that you can see your own legs should be applauded here. At ultra settings, things look great, and you can enable RTX if you really want to push the limits of your graphics card. Only in a select few instances where the frames drop for me. When I first got the game in 2021, frame rate was a huge issue, even though my specs are above and beyond the recommended requirements. Now it seems like things have been smoothed out for the most part. I immediately had to turn off motion blur, lens flares, occlusion, and film grain so I could stop squinting at the screen. The crowds on the streets seem to have to catch up with the player. When you drive for a minute, then stop, people and vehicles seem to just appear out of your field of view. It'll be completely dead 1 second, then the next it'll be bustling with activity. I'm guessing this is one of the graphical compromises made in exchange for a lack of loading screens. The sound design for Cyberpunk is all over the place. The voice acting is really well done. Even Keanu manages to pull his weight. Look, I love Keanu Reeves as much as the next guy, but I think we can all admit his acting is usually kinda stiff. He does a really good cool dude in sunglasses role, that's for sure. The soundtrack is okay. It's a star-studded affair featuring artists like Run the Jewels, Grimes, A$AP Rocky, and the band Refused, starring as Johnny Silverhand's band. Unfortunately for YouTube purposes, I had to turn off the licensed music, which probably had an impact on my impression. From what I could find, there were 3 primary composers assigned to the game, specializing in electronica. Generic sounding future music plays on the radio for the most part, and the intro-outro music is pretty uninspired. It's all appropriately dark and sinister, but maybe I'm just not the biggest fan of this style. The guns, swords, and explosives are really well done. Same with the vehicles. They actually did the right thing and recorded real car sound effects, which differs from a lot of companies who will typically create original sound effects for vehicles that just sound terrible. In nearly every cinematic moment of the storyline, there were sound effects missing, like the sound of a hand slapping your shoulder, or car doors opening and closing, or just the sound of objects falling down or being shot.
Drive, Jackie!
Come on, V! Shoot!
Hands! Keep her steady!
Hold tight, V!
All things considered, my feelings on Cyberpunk are mixed. The environments look great, but they feel lifeless. The characters are unique, but we don't get enough time to like them. The music is fine, but it isn't front and center enough to feel justified in focusing on so heavily in the story. And the story itself is just kind of meh. The stakes of the plot ultimately boil down to you needing to cure your terminal cyber cancer. On whether or not to play this game, my answer is sadly a no. It's a game that looks and plays well for the most part, but there are still too many visual, audio, and mechanical bugs throughout the main storyline. It'd be one thing if it was infrequent when exploring new areas or doing side missions, but the issues were constantly appearing during key story sequences. The motivations of a lot of the characters are questionable, and the finale ends up being just another long shooting gallery. These things are hard for me to say because I can tell that this was a game made with sincerity. For whatever variety of reasons that happened behind the scenes, it just didn't end up being the game it was promised to be. I don't even think it ended up being the game the devs wanted it to be. Buy this game on sale if you really want to try it out. Corporate greed, aka inflation, is hitting us all in the wallet pretty hard, and I wouldn't recommend any product over $50 if I had as many problems with it as I had with Cyberpunk. This game has an enormous fan base, and no disrespect to them, I'm just not convinced. Maybe in the future after some more updates and feature additions to iron out the rest of the wrinkles. Here's my loosely related segue into my moral of the story piece. When I was a kid, I used to do this thing where I would look at a random person on the street and try to imagine myself living their life, figuratively put myself in their shoes, give them a backstory, see life through their eyes, try to feel their fears, their passions, their home life, the whole shebang. Later I learned that doing that is actually a healthy exercise for developing empathy, the ability to understand and to share feelings of another. That's something we all need to keep a healthy amount of, myself included. It'll be a better world when we can all try to understand each other on such a fundamental level. This is why I'm not going to dig too hard into the developers of this game, because obviously a lot of passion was put into this project from a lot of very talented people. Sometimes we get ourselves involved in a project that becomes more complicated than we thought it would be, and it can end up being disappointing and frustrating, especially for creators who can put a tremendous amount of emotional investment into their creations only to have it turn out relatively lame. Having played in about 6 different bands throughout my life, this kind of feeling becomes pretty familiar after some time. This isn't to say that I didn't enjoy my time in those bands. It's just that even having put 110% into my musical projects, none of them really amounted to much in the end. I at least tried my best and entertained maybe a couple hundred people for a night or two. I'm starting to ramble, and this video's long enough, so I'll just end it on this. Don't be too hard on yourself or other people. As much as you've been through, give people the benefit of the doubt that they may be going through it too. God, I look like John Romero in this wig. Thanks for joining me, Ty Valentine, on this futuristic, sexy, lens flare-filled affair. I really wanted to like this game. Can't, with all honesty, recommend it over something like GTA 5. So, yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Stay excellent, and have a great evening.